This is the Smart Girl's Guide to Real Estate with Jami Hearn, your invitation to start building wealth on your terms. From first deals to big empires, this podcast will help smart girls invest smarter.
Hi, and welcome to the Smart Girl's Guide to Real Estate. I'm Jami Hearn. Today, we're joined by Kim Sullivan. She is a Boston-based realtor who's been helping clients buy and sell homes since 1997. With a sharp eye for strategy and a heart for people, she blends decades of experience with an intuitive, modern approach. I might add a little sassy approach too. Kim believes moving isn't just about finding a house. It's about creating a life that fits. Known for her honesty, humor, and Boston grit, she's passionate about educating buyers and sellers so they can make clear, empowered decisions. Kim helps her clients move with purpose, not pressure, making real estate feel human, soulful, and smart. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Jami.
I mean, you not admitting that there's a little edgy sass in there, just, I wanted everybody to be forewarned.
Okay, I can appreciate that. And I love to work by referral. So often people will know that about me because whoever referred them might tell them. But if it's somebody I haven't ever met before, I don't necessarily lead from that because somebody told me once a long time ago it was a little intimidating. And I really don't want to intimidate my own clients.
I mean, I think that that's a stigma that a lot of us experience. Like, because we're strong, smart women who know what we want and where we're going, people do find that intimidating because they haven't given themselves the permission to do that
It's true.
themselves.
It's so true. And I think it's like low-hanging fruit intimidation in a way because, and maybe not with the more modern Bostonians, but from when I grew up, like I feel like I'm the least intimidating one. There are way more. And I love the characters, but there's some of the edges are and the tongues are much sharper than mine. So, and it's gotten a little softer as I've gotten older, but I have a family member who is starting to look anytime now, and her brother is going to be home for Christmas, and we're all going out together. I know it's going to be fun. It's just going to be a great time. And it's like that when you have fun when you're working, it's like, oh, this is kind of awesome.
Well, honestly, that's the crux of why I do this. Like, I want people to know that working doesn't have to be drudgery. Like,
Right.
you can have fun and make an impact at the same time and make money. Like, that's
Right.
the trifecta.
Yeah. I want to, when I'm with my clients, I always figure the way I look at it, if you're a home seller and you've got to get your house ready, and I come in, I'm like, you got to do all these things and look at this and things maybe that to you are just a minor inconvenience. That rattly doorknob and the door that you know exactly how to close to make it shut. Well, some buyer might not. I'm like, can you just fix that before we go on the market? So all these little things might start to be overwhelming. And I appreciate the amount of work it takes to get your house ready to go on the market. So if you can kind of like make it a little fun along the way, like Mary Poppins, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, then it's just a much more pleasant experience for everybody. My sugar happens to be humor, so
It works.
it works for me.
How did you decide to become a realtor? I mean, I know you pretty well, and I don't even know this story.
Oh, it's fun. This is a fun story. It was an accident. So I Emma was a baby, and I was working like part-time doing a little things here and there, but I knew I wanted to work. People can feel how they want about this, but I was not a stay-at-home kind of mom,
I was
especially when
the
she was
same,
going to be
so
in
I
school.
understand.
I wanted to do something else with my head. Um, and my sister at that time was working. It used to be mailboxes, etc. Now it's like the UPS store or the FedEx store. And there was a realtor who would come in, and you could give them small jobs. Be like, "Here's my mailing. Can you stamp it and get it out in the mail?" When we used primarily mail in the '90s, and she said to my sister, "I like the way you work. Do you know anybody like you that needs a job?" And she said, "I do, my sister." So then she said, "Can I give her, can you call her?" Or I forget exactly how it happened, but we went out, and this woman ended up being a mentor and like a family member for the next 20 years of my life. And so she hired me. So I started out as an assistant, and I was doing stuff like that, like stuffing envelopes. And then she said, "Do you want to get your license?" I said, "Yeah, okay." And she said, "Okay, go do the education and I'll pay for it." And I said, "Thanks, okay." And then she said, "Okay, go take the test." And I did. And then I was like, "Oh, look." But I could start to do more things. But I worked side by side with her every day. And so she taught me exactly how she did things. And she worked from a very high level of integrity. But she also was a Bostonian who used humor. She was a no holds barred kind of woman. And she would tell you how it was. So I felt at home. I felt very at home. And we were at a big office at that time, and she wanted to go out on her own. And she said, "If I start my own office, will you come with me?" I said, "Where else would I go?" So we started a boutique company that was called Pathway Home Realty Group. And if you are local in Boston, everyone knew Judy Moses. Um, and she was actually killed by a drunk driver in 2018.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, and so that was like pretty bad.
Yeah, right.
That was pretty bad.
Devastating, I'm sure.
And we there were a couple of us in the office, and we kept it going for some time. And then I got to a point where one day I realized I would get to work to the office in the morning, and I would sit outside my car and not want to go in for like 20 minutes. And then finally one day I was like, "What am I doing? Like I literally can't even make myself go in there." And so that day I went in and I said, "Well, that's it. We have to figure this out." And I told the other women, I said, "If you want to continue at this office, I'll go to bat with her husband, who was also a friend because I had known him for so long." And I said, "Or this is where I'm going, and you can come with me. And I promise it's a great office. I wouldn't waste your time, but I recommend you go and talk to these guys." And that's how I ended up at Insight Realty Group, which, one, love the name, but two, the two guys who own that were our friends back at the big office 20 years ago.
Oh,
So they went and did their thing, and then we went and did our thing. And they also were people who I knew worked really hard and had a lot of integrity and cared about what they did. And it felt like a very natural transition for me, even though there was all that other stuff going on.
yeah.
Um, so that's how I ended up over there. But that was the whole story of my real estate beginning.
I like
I
that.
got a
And I
referral,
love that it was another woman that set you on that path.
right? Yeah. Yeah. And she was she didn't have any kids of her own. So in some way, like we had this undefinable relationship because it was employer employee. There was partnership, there was friendship, but she was 20 years older than me, so it was a little bit maternal too, but it really defied classification. Um, yeah, but she was something else.
Well, I love that. It doesn't need a label. Like,
No,
it is
no,
what
it
it
did
is,
not
and
leave
I
a
bet she was a little intimidating.
And you know what? It was so funny because she was this little lady. She was tiny, but she was mighty. And anyone who knows you would tell her, would say that about her.
I love that.
Yeah, it was great.
I mean, anyone who hears like I'm leaving practicing law to go into real estate, they think I'm becoming a real estate salesperson. And I thought it was really important to have a conversation with a real estate salesperson because what you do on the day to day is so vastly different than what I do as an investor on the day to day. But there's some overlap, and it lends to some really interesting conversations like, oh my God, you should have seen this time that we went into a house and there was an iguana loose. Like,
I've there's so many stories like that. Um, I've had houses with reptiles where, okay, so when I'm closer in Boston, there's always another agent. It's a company showing. So there's always another agent there. But as I get out into some of the other towns, sometimes it's a lockbox. So you make your appointment, you get your appointment confirmed, and you go with your clients. And usually there's notes, but sometimes there's not. And one time we went in and there was like a reptile room that nobody was expecting. And there were, like giant aquariums with big iguanas and snakes. And I was like, that's that room. I'm not really going to go in there. um, there's been houses where there are, oh God, there's so many stories, Jamie. We've had houses where people are, what do you call them? Not pack rats.
hoarders?
That's the hoarders. Yeah, pack rat isn't a nice way to say that, I guess. We had a client who was a hoarder, and I think it was really a deep depression kind of situation. But it was the day before the closing, and she's got floor to ceiling stuff, and we were like, get a dumpster and get the big one. And we were just, me and two of the other women in my office, chucking stuff. We'll like turn her around so she doesn't see, because she wanted to go through everything. We're chucking stuff out the windows, and she'd be like, look at these shoes. And she was from the South, so she could tell you wherever to go and you'd enjoy the trip. Do you know these shoes were Sally's shoes? And we went to this dance and we danced all night, and we'd be like, that's great. We got to get you out of here. But and there was one time I had to break into a listing, and the reason I knew I could break in. So what happened was, it was a husband and wife, and the husband was sick in the hospital, and the wife would go to the hospital, and we had keys, but she had an alarm system, so she would make sure the alarm system was turned off. She called me. She said, I know I have an appointment, but I forgot to turn off the alarm. You can't go in. And I was like, I can't. And I was like, okay. And I was like, can I really not go in? Well, she had 3 daughters, and they told me they would go in the house, out of the house all the time. And I knew the thing was only on the doors. There was no little monitors on the windows. And I was like, the girls told me they used to sneak out, so there has to be an easy way in and out of this house. Well, it turned out there was a window open for the basement, but the basement window was up high, so I'm looking in, and it's like a 6-foot drop. And genius that I was, I kind of went in head first instead of backing in. So it was on a main drag. The fire department was across the street, and I was like, I'm gonna get arrested. It's like someone's gonna see me with my legs sticking out of the window if I don't break my neck on the way in. But I got in, and we did have our appointment.
We had one very similar to that. I went with my agent and we ran into another guy who was supposed to be meeting his agent there. The lockbox wouldn't work. So the window was clearly open, and my agent was like, go through the window. I'm not going through the window. I'm too old to go through the window.
This was 20 years ago, probably.
Yeah, so the kid crawled through the window, and we had a great showing. It was fantastic.
I mean, I figure a seller wants you to get everybody in the house. When once I was in, I was like, Maria, I got in. She said, how? I said, don't worry. What's the code so I can open the front door? So she had to give me the code, but she didn't ask me about it after that. But there's lots of I don't know, antics that happened. I went through a glass door once.
On purpose?
No. It was a situation where I had a lockbox, and I was with my client, and it was an old wooden door, and they swell. And I was like, I know how to do this. You just got to show it who's boss. So I and went, and I was horrified.
Whoops.
Horrified. And I just looked at my client and I was like, I was so embarrassed. And I was like, okay, we're in. I was like, don't worry about it. I'll find out a way to clean this up and just go look at the house. So I'm calling the other agent. I was like, I got a situation. I just broke your front door. I was like, like you have to come. There's no glass. And to this day, when I see that client, he's like, I hope you're not breaking into anybody's houses. And I was like, look, I did it for you. But he was from Ireland. So when he said it to me, all I could do was laugh because he's speaking to me with a brogue and it's entertaining. And it turned out that the glass was thin. They had done something. They were keeping the door, but had to replace glass. So it was a temporary piece of glass, which is why it wasn't tempered, which was why I could go through it. But I was like, blood was coming down my, I mean, not a lot, but there was blood. I was horrified. I was so embarrassed. I was like, I just broke
That's
these
a good
door.
one. I
We
like
got in
it.
though. We got in. It was just like, I threw too much weight around that time.
So
Yeah.
I love that. I know you work with a lot of primary home buyers, but do you work with investors also?
Occasionally, most of my clientele has been um, buyers and sellers for their primary residence. Occasionally, we'll get somebody who wants to buy um, a condo for investment. And a lot of times, those people will buy a one-bedroom condo because they don't want to worry about the lead paint law, and you generally don't have a children in one-bedroom condos. Now, if
Educate
you
us
do, then you
for
go to
a minute, if you would.
on the
Like,
lead paint law in
yeah, because
Massachusetts.
I'm going to guess most of our listeners have maybe heard about lead paint, but have no idea what the laws are around it.
So the law is that if there are children if the house is built before 1978 and there are children under, oh, is it 6 or 7, then you have to de-lead, because that's when you see the amount of lead it takes to harm a child. It's it's such a tiny amount of lead. So, but we have a lot of old homes in Massachusetts, and if there is no record of it being de-leaded, then you have to say, I don't know. So some people say, well, I de-leaded. Well, if somebody didn't come and inspect and there's not like a de-lead certification letter, you can't represent that. So if you can't dig up the paperwork, then you have to say, I don't know. It's not unlawful to say that it's unknown if you truly don't know. And then if you know, you check the box that says, I know, and here's where it is. And generally you have some paperwork for that, or you've done the de-lead process and you have the paperwork for that. And if it's, when it's more recent and record keeping has gotten better, there's a database in Massachusetts.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and you can go and check and you can look in. But sometimes people say it's not in there, but I have the letter, and the letter will have the inspector's name on it, and you can verify. So it's not that unusual anymore. But and over the years, like someone might buy a house that they bought, and the seller might have said, I don't know if there's lead, and I don't know where it could be. And then those people would move in and say, well, I'm going to have kids, or I have kids, so now I've got to do lead. So then that new owner would have done the process and the paperwork would be updated.
what is the process to remove that?
So you can do encapsulation. You have to have a lead safe inspector do it, and a lead safe contractor do the work. So there is a certification for that in Massachusetts. The biggest concerns are old windows. Opening and closing the old windows creates the lead dust, and then little kids might climb up and put their hands in it and then put their hands in their mouth, or opening and closing old doors, that might have lead paint. So the contractors they'll come and inspect and find out where the lead is, and then they will make a plan to do the work. And they'll either um, The most recent ones I've done, they did encapsulation, and that's satisfactory. Um, we had one, when was it, that house? It was a big house in Dover, and it came back. The buyer wanted to do a lead test because they were having a baby. So, and I was like, I didn't know what I was in for. There was only one place in the whole house that there was lead, and it was somebody had painted a brick fireplace.
Oh,
So it was a very easy solution in that case. So now, over the years in that house, there had been many updates. So even though it was built prior to 1978, there had been updates. So anything that had lead paint or lead based anything had been removed or renovated since. So there is some nuance to it, but there when people get the form and folks say unknown, it's not unlawful, but and they don't have kids and they've never tested, so truly they cannot represent that they know or don't know.
well, and I want to point out that this is an explanation of the Massachusetts rule, but lead
Yes,
paint is an issue nationwide. It's
yes,
not isolated in the Northeast just because we have all old buildings here. Well,
right.
not all, but a lot. So anybody who's buying, selling, renovating, flipping, whatever, needs to be aware of lead paint.
Yeah. And there is so our disclosure form is actually the whole packet is the disclosure form. So the seller is, the seller is doing the disclosing and the buyer is acknowledging what the seller has disclosed, but there is a whole packet from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts about the lead paint law and what it is and what are the responsibilities. So and it's just you just want everyone to be aware of what it is. But that's also a reason if you're an investor, you might want to buy a one bedroom because you're like, well, I want that, maybe I want somebody who's doing post grad work or, a single person because it's unlikely that they're going to have children. However, if you buy something and you don't do lead and it's a single person or a single person who becomes a couple and then the couple becomes a trio, you are required to de-lead and you have to give those people housing while you de-lead. So that's
Interesting.
something for people. Yeah, that's something for people to think about. The onus is always on the landlord in that case,
Yeah.
no
Yeah,
matter what.
that's good information.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't even think about that. So I'm glad that you brought that up because it's easy to overlook it.
Yeah, and it's kind of important.
Yeah. I mean,
Or you buy stuff that's newer, but I think it's still prudent to check. Do you want to hear a horror story that I learned in continuing ed one year?
of course.
Okay. So we had this particular instructor told us about it was a house that was it wasn't an old house. It was, younger construction, older than what you would think past 1978. And it popped for lead and they couldn't figure out why. The owner, and they forget because people forget all the time, including me. Um, he had marine paint and he painted a wall in his house with it. And evidently that has lead in it.
Oh,
And so that was what popped it. So it was just interesting. So it's like maybe you shouldn't have carte blanche when you're representing saying this house was built in, 1997, there's no lead. Enough years have passed that people have done things. Now they're not going to, this guy didn't purposefully set out to use lead paint in his house. I'm sure he did it unknowingly, or he wasn't thinking, but he wasn't thinking, I'm going to add lead to my house where there's no lead and do that. So it's just things to be mindful.
right. And people will use whatever they have laying around.
Right.
Investors do that too. Like, oh, I have some paint from my last job. Let me just use that on
Right.
this. And unless you really think through, there could be some exposure, lead and a variety of other things. Who
Right.
knows?
Right. Yeah. And you don't know. And there's always environmental stuff, right? Um, it's not on the surface a reason not to buy or sell. It's just a thing to be mindful and it take
Yeah.
something you take into consideration for the whole process.
Yeah,
It's like, well, this
absolutely.
house has, I'm going to have to de-lead. and I'm going to have to do this, and I'm going to have to do this. But this is the area I want. I'm near my family. I'm the school district I want. So you're making an informed decision, and you're
Right.
consenting. It's like, when we were talking before we started the call, I was telling you my daughter bought a house. There were 10 offers. Um, we knew this was a house that had issues. She had her home inspection, things came up. There was one thing that came up. We were like, please just take care of that. And the seller did. But the other things, and I said, just decide. I said, there's enough contractors in the family where this might not be as big an issue for you as it might be with somebody else. Her dad is a contractor and my husband is a contractor. So she has ways of getting things done where she's not paying full freight. So for another first time buyer, they might have had to say, I can't buy this house. This is too much for me to take on top of this. But she happened to be lucky enough that she knows tradespeople. But again, it's informed decision making. You know what you're dealing with, and then you make a decision from there.
Um, there's always something that crops up, no matter
Oh yeah.
how many deals you've done, how many buyers, sellers you've represented. You always have to be ready for the unexpected, I think.
That's what's fun. It's something different every day. Every day there's something different. So it's not boring. Um, and also you always learn something.
Yeah,
Even if you wanted to be like, God, please let me just have a boring, ignorant day today. Something will come up and you'll get a lesson and something that you can put in your toolbox if you want it or not. But I think that is what makes the realtor community. That's what I like about us. We're quick thinking. We have a lot of experience. We're creative thinkers. We're pulling from something else that happened years ago, and we're talking to each other. So
yeah.
even though we're competitive, we are also collaborative. We're like, hey, remember that house you had that this had? What did you do? How did you handle that? So it's like we're all on the playground together. Even if we're on opposite teams, we're still playing together
I
in
love
some
that.
way. Yeah, it's cool.
Have you seen an impact in the Boston market where homeowners are having a harder time acquiring properties because of institutional investors like hedge funds and things buying up inventory?
So people love to ask me that question. I haven't run across it in great numbers. Now, we don't have, Boston's a small city. It's a big little city or a little big city.
Yeah.
So we have less inventory because of that already, just because we have a smaller space. And we have a lot of people who come, we have universities, hospitals, industry. So you get a lot of people who, resident occupants. So, and I personally haven't run into it. Occasionally, I see in overseas investors because people overseas love to invest in American real estate. It's a pretty safe place to park your money long term. There are some where you'll see that it's, if you look at the public record, it's very clearly some kind of business or institution that has purchased this property.
I'm seeing
Uh,
it in other assets, not specifically single family residences, but mobile home parks
yeah.
and
Oh
multifamily.
yeah.
I'm seeing that become more present.
It's I don't no one in any legislation asked me my opinion on this, but I'm going to tell you. I don't think it should be when it comes to I think up to maybe even 6 dwelling unit buildings. I think those should be for, you know, regular people or somebody who wants to invest in real estate and grow their portfolio, and maybe they're using an LLC. But in terms of large corporations buying single family homes or condos, I don't really think that's cool. I don't think we should have that in that way. Because we have a shortage of housing. If we didn't have a shortage of housing, I think it would be a different story. But whereas we don't have enough housing for people, You want to go buy a big apartment complex.
Yeah. And I think that Boston is also facing the same affordability crisis,
Oh,
potentially on a slightly different scale, because
oh
the
yeah.
cost of living in Boston is vastly different than it is middle of Indiana. But still,
Right.
affordability is a real issue.
Yes, it is. And it's hard for people. And I appreciate how hard it is for people. My family's blue collar. So I appreciate how hard people work to get a house. Um, and a thriving real estate market is good for all of us as homeowners, but it's hard to get into it. Like once you have one, you can use it to build, but that first one is hard. The down payment money is hard, and the rents are high too. So if you're paying a high rent, it's hard to put anything away to save so you can have down payment money.
And I feel like it's harder now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like
Yeah,
the barriers to entry have gotten much more substantial. And the cost of living overall is so much that kids, I call them kids because,
right,
there are children buying
right.
in the market today. It's hard to come up with 20% down, or and some of these lesser programs where you can come in with 3 or 5% down are expensive.
Yeah. Um, it's I tell people there's a way that you know if someone wants to buy a house. Like, and people say, well, you can't tell them that not buying their coffee is going to get them, they're going to save enough money to buy the house. And I'm like, I get it. I understand. But it's not that alone, it's their mindset. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, what is it going to take from, I really want to buy a house, or I really want to buy a condo, or I really want to buy a two family. What's going to take for me to do it? And it's the switch in the mindset. So it's not like, oh, you can't have your coffee every day. It's what do I have to do and where do I have to restructure so I can buy something?
So the coffee is funny because my kids had the same concern that buying their house for the first time in their early 20s. So my daughter-in-law, she likes fancy coffee. I do too. So I bought her own little espresso machine. So
So smart.
it was a perfect birthday gift because,
So
like,
smart.
what
Brilliant.
your kids have so much shit. They don't need more stuff.
No,
At
no.
least mine do. So
Right.
it was a perfect birthday gift and it allowed them to squirrel away a couple bucks.
Right. And it's just I can see how they get frustrated as a whole collective, but when I'm working with them, they're so smart. They're so focused. They know what they want. They want to know about your experience. They ask great questions and they all have their budgets in a spreadsheet. Way better than I was when I'm their age. They're like, I can do this and I can afford this and I can do this.
Better than I am now.
Right. And it's like, I'm pretty impressed with you guys. So all these people who told me these young people were never going to do this, lies.
Well, I
They're
mean,
great. Leave them alone. They're fine.
our generation, there were kids that probably still don't own houses either and just can't get it together. Every generation
Right.
has a
Yeah.
variety of personalities.
And that's why, some people can just rent. There's nothing wrong with renting. I have friends who are like, I don't want to be a homeowner. I have a realtor friend, very successful, who owns a single family home and is now renting it out and rents and working and traveling the world. He said, I love my carefree life. And I was like, he's worked the last 30 years, he's earned it. I was like, right? It's a completely different perspective and experience. There's nothing wrong with it. But if somebody wants to be a homeowner, let's figure out a way to do it. And you know, there's some people in my own family. They're like, well, I want this kind of house with this, and this. And I said, you have to learn to love what your budget is. And it's like, I drive a Honda. I've driven a Honda for so many years. And I'm so happy with my Hondas. I love them. That's why I keep driving them. However, if I start going around and shopping for Bentleys, this car is going to look like a tuna can. So The Bentley is not in my budget right now. So I'm not going to go over there and, be upset that I'm not going to have one. I'm going to continue to love my car that I have. So I told them, I'm like, let's figure out what your budget is and what you can do with it.
But isn't it like every time you go out, you discover new things about your car? So it's like a new car all over again.
Yeah, we have a great relationship. So, I mean, I think it's just I think, you know, for the average person, having a home increases your net worth in such a way that to me, it's worth it. But if you don't want to do it or it's not worth it to you, then don't do it. It's fine. There's not a rule that you have to have a house.
Well, I do like the example that you give of that realtor that owns a house and rents
Yeah,
it out. Like
yeah,
he effectively is arbitraging his own property. So, like, cool. You get the benefits of real estate ownership and the freedom of renting. So
right.
there's
Uh,
a, there's a model that fits for anybody who has a desire to enter the market.
it's so true. And I love that. Well, one, I love when I learn things from my realtor friends. But and he said, when the rates were low, we all refinanced so many times. And he said, it's like a savings account. That house is like a savings account at this point. Why would I? And I was like, I loved the way he put that. I was like, perfect. It's a perfect way to put it.
Well, and for, like if you own your house, your personal residence, you refi, you cash out, whatever. You can do that on investment properties too, and pull that money out tax
Yes.
free
Right.
without selling it, because that's a tax event if you sell it.
Right.
If you
Yes.
just refi,
Yep.
it's a non-tax event. It's not income. So
Right.
there are tons of things.
It's so I've been trying to like tell my husband this for years. I'm like, this is what I want to do. And he's been resistant. Just in like the last year and a half or 2 years, he's like, all right, so if we pull money out of this, what do we buy? And I'm like, who are you? Like it took me that long to get him to understand that we could do this, but we're getting there. It's a little slow, Jamie, but we're getting there.
It's all right. Progress is good.
Yeah.
Well, Kim, I want to thank you for sharing some insight into your experience as a realtor because, like I said, so many people think real estate and they think realtor. So I had to give them that contact with one of the
Thank
coolest
you.
realtors I know.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me, Jamie.
It's always a
Sincerely.
pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you.
I will see all of you next time on the Smart Girls Guide to Real Estate. Talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Girls Guide to Real Estate. If you loved today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share it with another smart girl who's ready to build generational wealth.